All right, welcome to Distilled Security Podcast, episode 11. My name's Justin. I'm here with Rick and Joe, and thank you for joining us. So we got a pretty good episode here, going with a little bit of breaches and privacy and all this stuff. I think the place I want to start is hot on some of the topics, and we're kind of dipping into political, not really going political, but there was a story that came out with Signal. Big fan of Signal. I use it all the time.
What is Signal?
Yeah, Signal is an encrypted message app. One of the benefits about it is that it doesn't have kind of a back-end server. It basically has a server to coordinate and connect people, but all the communication is encrypted from point to point. So everybody basically has their own keys that are stored on their side, and if you lose your phone, there it goes. Like all your data is gone, into that. So one of the advantages of that is, you not relying on middle people with that, like the common thing with SMS. All the phone companies, can read your SMS, because they have to basically translate into a way to, through some of the mediums, and a number of companies have gotten hit over, do you have end-to-end encryption? And, Messenger came out where they put that in, but Signal has always had this with it. And it's gotten more popular, I'd say, now for kind of back-end communications on different things, it's gotten good, like, as a security community, I'm probably preaching to the choir. We all know about, Signal. But then you get some of the stories out there where, like, they're going over Signal, to not get caught for what they're talking about. In this case here, the story goes that there was some coordination with one of their operations, and they accidentally incorporated the editor-in-chief of The Atlantic into the Houthi strike that just recently happened. What was it? Mike Waltz was the one that originally created the group and put him into this group here. And you had people like J.D. Vance, you had Marco Rubio, you had a number of like high-profile people that were coordinating on this strike that were against some of the Houthis and everything. And this goes into like a couple of things that I think are really interesting to talk about this. One, the use of approved and unapproved channels, into this. I'm curious, and there wasn't a great explanation. I've been hearing like some of the stuff, going back and forth, but nobody said like kind of why they use Signal, into this,
No.
And is it just a technology of familiarity that Mike Waltz like, oh yeah, I'll just spin up a security channel and we'll, coordinate with some of the low-hanging fruit and stuff of that nature. So I'd be curious, to talk about that a little bit, but just, from the, corporate side, is this an all right thing to use alternate channels into this that maybe isn't controlled? I can think of some legal aspects into this here. I don't know. What do you guys think here?
You go first.
So I feel pretty strongly that there's like a difference, but there's a little bit of pragmatism you have to apply here, right? Mm-hmm. There's always going to be what I think of as chatter between, if you're at a corporation, like between employees on non-corporate communications.
Okay.
Right? I think that's just always going to happen.
It's probably happening
People
on
talk.
text message and Messenger all the time.
Yep.
Right,
Facebook, whatever.
Or even phone calls. I mean,
And if you provision corporate assets, even if you provision corporate phones, and even if they're fully separate than personal phones, either way, like people are going to use non-approved channels to talk about work stuff. People make friends at work.
Right.
They're going to talk about work stuff. And ultimately, you could debate whether or not it's that much different than talking at a bar, but it's just another communication channel, and it's going to be offline. Mm-hmm. So I think you have to accept the reality of that. Now, I think from a corporate policy perspective, I also think it would be an absolute operational nightmare to try and somehow ban or block or stop or prevent people from using alternate communication channels.
Yeah, I don't know how you would do it. You would have to provision corporate phones, but still they would have personal phones.
Right.
So
I think this is one of those places where you really need to use carrots and not sticks, meaning like make sure the officially sanctioned channels you have support the communication mechanisms people need in terms of like, hey, look, this is how we share files, and here's like a couple ways internally and externally, like whatever makes sense based on how you do work. Hey, this is how you exchange short messages. This is how you exchange long messages. This is kind of like our typically accepted ways of working, right? And you know that people are going to have, again, side, communication channels on the side. But from a matter of policy, I think it's super important to educate people to say, hey, look, if you're talking about anything important, like, or I should say official, or anything you're representing the company, or there's company files or proprietary data involved or whatever, that's got to stay on company channels. I think, in whether or not you even believe that's going to be true, I think you have to set that as the tone from, frankly, a legal liability perspective and from a compliance perspective, because ideally everyone does follow the rules on that. Sometimes people won't, but then they need to realize that they're off on an island.
Yeah, and that's fair and everything. I know, like, I've had a couple of clients over the years, they'll actually go to, like, alternate mediums for, like, disaster recovery.
Yeah. Incident response.
I do think that's a bit of it. Like, emergency mode operations is a bit of a different animal.
But that could still be approved, and that should still be part of your decision of this is the out-of-band approved mechanism, and maybe Signal would be good.
I mean, look, if you're dealing with like major layoffs or M&A activity, and you're afraid that certain administrators might not be trustworthy, again, there are times where I think it's actually okay to use out-of-band channels, but it needs to be very specific, very intentional, very clear when it's in use and when it's not in use.
Right. And I don't want to steal your thunder, but something you brought up earlier, and I was thinking about it too, is you put something in Signal. Well, I always love the feature of Signal for, get rid of the messages expire them after a day, 5 minutes.
Yeah, they had a month on this channel.
And so it goes away. And so it brings up a couple things. Well, what if people are talking about things that need to be kept because of e-discovery and retention? And then you brought up, well, what if it's a conversation that the Freedom of Information Act wants to be able to pull, and now it's gone.
Right. Yeah. And I do think, like, educating employees on, hey, by the way, if you are communicating sensitive data over a personal Signal account, right, a lot of weird stuff can start to happen with discovery, or not even if it's not Signal, even if it's whatever, WhatsApp or just text message or whatever. Yep. If you start using personal accounts to communicate corporate stuff, and as soon as there's a whiff of that, right, like because someone in an official email that gets discovered says, hey, I sent you a text on this, or I check your Signal. Right. Now it's scope. Now it's discovery. Now your personal stuff is theoretically part of discovery. Now, in Signal, if that stuff is gone, well, again, depending on whether you're sort of on offense or defense from a legal perspective, right, prosecution or defense, you could be facing a world of hurt because you could have official documentation, official communication channels where you're not sufficiently able to provide evidence about what you did or what you didn't do.
Yeah. And imagine on a personal level, if now you are ordered to turn over your personal phone, and who knows what you've been looking at, who knows what you have on there, that's all going to be at least reviewed by somebody, and whether it can be put in
and somebody will have to have the smarts to filter out whether it's applicable to the case or not, but they'll see everything.
And and typically, the way that evidence works in legal proceedings is the prosecution and the defense get to look at it. So it gets picked apart by both sides. People that are looking to maybe, defend your honor in some ways, but also people that are looking to impugn it, even if it's just a straight social thing, right? If it makes you a less credible witness or puts you more on the defensive in the eyes of a jury or whatever's going on, they can lever some things that maybe you wouldn't want to be levered, and frankly have nothing to do with the business dealing that's under review.
Now, I wanted to bring up too with this, because it almost has nothing to do with Signal. Yeah. The way the reporter got added into this was either in his contacts or something like that. You can actually change your name into it, and it was just the initials, and he thought it was somebody else, and put them a part of a group. So, it wasn't any fault, or anything like that, but he thought he was adding somebody else. You can do that with email, like with some of this stuff. So, it's not immune to Signal or other devices.
But I would say like corporate, like official channels typically have naming conventions.
Yeah.
So like, yeah, you could do that with email, but at the same time.
And it does, like, there are technology out there that will flag outside people, from a corporation or something like that. But if you have, if you're in a big corporation, and how many John Smiths do you have into there, and how many times do you get, CC'd and you're like, oh, it's the wrong one,
Absolutely.
type of thing. Most of the time it's, just dealing with random stuff. But
yeah, I've worked with organizations that have absolutely had to do privacy disclosures because they put the wrong, they sent the email to the wrong recipient, and they're out of the organization. They're not the wrong, and it absolutely happens.
And don't worry, we password protected that spreadsheet. But then the second email we sent is what the password was sent in. So same mechanism. Yeah. But you brought up an interesting topic because I just saw this on. There's a TV show called Bad Sisters. I don't know if you saw it. It's a couple seasons, like 8 episodes or whatever. And in one of the episodes, kind of the bad guy in it took the phone of one of the sisters and changed the boyfriend's name, phone number to his. And then when she started sending texts and she was cheating on her husband, he started getting them to hold it against his sister-in-law as like, look, you got to stop doing this. And all he did was just change the phone number. And so she thought she was texting.
And who knows anybody's phone number nowadays?
Right.
Type of thing.
Just hit the send button and off went the
That's
pictures.
her name right there, type of thing.
Well, and you brought up a good point that I think is slightly related earlier as well, which is when you're using, really any communication mechanism, the security of it, even if it's encrypted end to end, if the end point is vulnerable in some way, shape, or form, right, the whole channel is potentially vulnerable. And so if someone's using Signal on their personal phone or machine or whatever, and that's vulnerable, to your point earlier, like, it's a mechanism in. So I do think that, again, as corporate policy, you have to say official channels only. And the other thing, too, is even from
they should spin up their own Signal app? They can. It's all open source.
It's actually not, though. I haven't seen anyone do it, but I don't think that's a bad idea.
Well, does Signal have an enterprise version?
No, but they have everything open source that technically you can spin it up, type of thing.
I don't know that that'd be a bad idea, honestly.
Yeah, and they could probably do some additions into which groups, and actually integrate it into some of the government identity stuff and everything, if they wanted to go down that route. But we all know, we haven't talked about the ideal solution for all this is just put a disclosure down at the bottom of your communication. Say if anybody got this, wasn't supposed to.
Unread it immediately.
Yeah, exactly.
If that would have been at the bottom, then the Atlantic would have read that, and they would have said, we definitely aren't going to publish all these articles, all these messages.
I was like, I'm not authorized.
So I just found this. So the report suggests that Waltz may have confused Goldberg, and Jeff Goldberg's the guy from the Atlantic's initials, JG, with those of another official. So that's what we were talking about.
But the other thing I wanted to bring up quickly, though, is from an endpoint security perspective, the other thing that if it's if people are communicating on an unapproved channel that you don't get is anything in your detective stack that's watching UBA or potential indicators of compromise, like you ain't seeing that. Right? It's just not monitored because it's potentially a personal channel. So, things to keep in mind. So I think pragmatically you have to realize people are going to talk on not official channels, but you probably got to remind them periodically to be like, hey, if this is trending towards official territory in any way, shape, or form, or you're sharing proprietary data, you got to bring it into an approved channel.
Yeah.
And there was one other piece, though, and I think it's the first time I've heard this happening, but and it came out I don't think Signal until recently has ever been claimed to have been breached, right? And now in the last month, there was a claim that the Russians have somehow or another breached
There's been a lot of weird claims out there, but they usually come down and say, no, the underlying protocol has never been, to my knowledge, breached, into that. It's always the endpoints or the device or something like that where those are the weekends.
So if you're securing the device,
Right.
it's less likely.
But if you unlock your phone and give it to the FBI, they'll copy all the contents, including your signal, messaging off of that.
Yeah, and there's definitely a difference between like, was the infrastructure compromised, or were different accounts compromised because people maybe
they don't have the infrastructure to actually respond to that.
Sure.
I loved, and it's actually funny. Like some of the government, like people will actually get really mad at Signal. Like this was years ago when I'd read it. They give us a subpoena, like give us all the text message, and they're like, we don't have anything. Like here's what we have: some phone numbers that they talk to.
Yeah,
that's it. Type of thing. They're like, no, you need to give it this. Like we don't have
doesn't
it.
exist.
Yeah, like. And it takes them a little bit to like, what do you mean you don't have it? Because they give it to phone companies all the time, and they get all the messages and everything, coming back to them. So it's a educational thing from a law enforcement perspective. If you're not familiar with some of these end-to-end encrypted messaging, into that. But yeah, it's even interesting. Like depending on the technology, like Teams is end-to-end unless you enable some stuff on it. Like if you start enabling some features, it turns off end-to-end type of thing. So you have to, I was looking at that for some scoping stuff on whether you could do like some PII, over it. And it's like, is it end-to-end? And let's look at it.
Depends on the configuration.
Yeah, if you start doing like recording or AI or some of the stuff where it has to kind of see what you're doing, type of thing. It's like, it's not end-to-end anymore, type of thing. So,
So, end of the day, you still encourage people to use Signal? You going to stop using it?
No. I love Signal.
Yeah.
I'm not going to stop using it for personal stuff. And I think for isolated instances of professional things, it's the right move, but you just got to be really intentional about it.
Yeah, and I think a little bit different from where they're using for how we use it. Usually, at least, in some of the cases, I use it in smaller groups, if we're talking about different things.
We plan podcast topics over Signal.
Yeah, and it's just us three really on that. But we have, a bourbon group that it's bigger and all that stuff. But if I ever use it for any type of business, it's usually one-on-one or a very small group. They had like 18 people, that I saw into there. Not
talking about some really sensitive stuff.
Yeah, and not one of them knew all the people in there, so you can't know and vet like all these numbers and be like, I'm sure not one of them had every single number in there, So it was like, okay, they're part of this group. Somebody vouched for them, So,
somebody didn't accidentally add the wrong.
JG. Exactly. So you're trusting through, other people, into that, which. Almost you have to at a large group, into this.
Yeah. But then, like, what's the level of sensitivity of stuff you should be talking about in a large group? And that's a different question.
And the other thing I like about Signal is, developed by the Signal Foundation, which is a nonprofit organization. So they're not supposed to be.
Their motives are,
they're not motivated by money. They're motivated by truly creating a secure environment.
Yeah. And I will throw out, if you don't, definitely contribute to them. I drop $10 a month, with them. I like to pay back on products I use a lot. So we do this in development. We use some like big third-party products, in some of the stuff, and we contribute to them through GitHub, sponsorship program. But Signal is one thing that I use a lot, so I give $10 a month to them. So if you have it in your budget, definitely think about, and you use it a lot and value it. Definitely give.
Every once in a while, it comes up and it says, remember your PIN or validate your PIN, and then once in a while it comes up and says, "You ready to donate again?" And then you click the button. So, well, that's good. Anything else on Signal?
Well, you were saying there've been a lot of claims, over time about like Signal potentially being compromised or not or whatever. I think there's another company that's been denying claims of compromise recently.
Yeah. I wasn't sure where you're going with that because there was another one too. But Oracle Cloud is denying that they had a compromise or a breach, but there was somebody claiming on, I think it was on Friday last week.
Yeah.
And so there's still a lot of information to be uncovered, and we'll probably have to do another update on this in the future when everything settles. But at a high level, they said that 140,000 Oracle Cloud tenants were potentially, the threat actor claims they have a list of those whose data was compromised, making up that 6 million records.
Pretty big.
Okay. And the from what I
Are
understand,
these records on the tenants or records of their customers that they had in their cloud, or
it's what I understand is that it's 6 million data records stolen from Oracle Cloud's federated SSO login servers. So like authentication, that kind of stuff.
Gotcha.
And the hacker claimed the data included encrypted SSO passwords, Java key store files, key files, and Enterprise Manager JPS keys. And so, but there's been a lot of people who've been checking into this, and some of the people checking in are looking and saying, well, it might not be on the actual current day Oracle stuff. I know it's something legacy or something that was like deproved and just not gone. And but on the other hand, other people are coming forth and claiming, and there's some good articles out there, just search for them, that there's customers are coming forward saying, yeah, some of the data that they claim they had in their sample that they released is actual real data.
Yeah, some journalists have gotten cuts of the samples from the attackers, and those potential customers have said, yeah, this is legit, this is us. So while Oracle says, nope, there's no breach, whatever, people are saying, yeah, this is our data.
Yeah, and maybe there's not a breach of the Oracle Cloud infrastructure itself, but maybe there's some other Oracle thing.
I'm always suspicious of people coming out pretty immediately and be like, yeah, it wasn't us, type of thing. It's like, can you just say you're investigating? Like, like, don't come out and be like, nah, that wasn't us. It's like, just look into it. There's...
Well, it does feel very much like, although I would guess this is not the case, whenever the statement is, yeah, we thought about it, it's not us, it does feel like investigation concluded.
Yeah.
I would suspect they're still looking into it.
How many times have we seen that? And then a few weeks later is, well, upon further investigation, we've realized that the breach has been expanded to, this.
Yeah, exactly that.
So that's why I think we'll have to do it.
It could be an insider that's, copied, some hard drives or whatever it is, type of thing. Continue to investigate it, into this. So.
But I do think it raises some good topics potentially around like, okay, well, because I kind of like that we're in this liminal state. Like, is it real? Is it not real? Kind of thing, even though it kind of feels real. But
what should you do? What could you do?
Exactly.
Well, I think the first step is if there's a reasonable suspicion, even if you don't think it is, like Oracle is coming out, start resetting passwords. Start setting keys. Go through and be like, hey, we're working with you. We don't think it's us. We're still investigating, but we're going on the safe side.
That's the exact advice. So I got a really great compliment because of what my team did for one of our clients, where they are heavily supported by one of the big consulting firms, and we're doing some very point cybersecurity vCISO/GRC and a little bit of technical work. Well, we beat the other group to the punch Monday morning, getting the email out that said just do that. And then a few hours later, I was chatting with the CIO, and he said, you beat them to the punch, and we're already resetting passwords.
Great,
and that was
nice.
awesome.
I love that. Yeah,
and they're a growing company, so it wasn't super difficult for them to do it and start to get the keys rotated and get creds rotated.
Gotcha.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Yeah, and hopefully, we don't know the source of the breach, but hopefully that's closed, maybe, or whatever it is, type of thing.
Limited scope. But
otherwise, they'll have to redo it again.
Yeah.
But, to me, when we're talking about, like, well, what should you do? It's the typical consulting answer to some extent also of, like, other than the password thing, which is, I think, great advice across the board. It depends.
What does it depend on, Rick?
Well, like, how are you using Oracle, right?
Why are they using Oracle?
Well, there are quite a few companies to which you would need to send that question. But like, how are you using it? What data's in it? What scares you about how you're utilizing it? Funnily enough, I'm working with an extremely small organization right now to help them shore up some of their security. And we were just recently talking about incident response. And they are so small that they need like a very high level plan and then really just like some job aids. Like, if you have like 6 critical systems, if this one gets compromised, what are like the 18 steps you do? Basically the playbook. And they're all highly tailored to, well, how do you use the system? Is this the payroll system? Is this the accounting system? Is this the legal data storage system? Whatever it is. And so it put me in the mind of, no matter how big you are, I think people get wrapped around the axles on what a playbook is. Because they'll be like, well, what's our ransomware playbook? And it applies to everything that could be ransomwared. And we're a massive organization with 15,000 applications. And how could I even ever write this playbook? It's like, no. Like, honestly, just put something down so that in the heat of battle, you kind of how are we using the system? What would we be scared about? Who do we need to involve? Is this a thing that could have regulatory implications? Do we need to brief legal on it? Or is it a thing that no, this is just the schedule that we clean the bathrooms and empty the trash? Yeah. There's a huge
what do they
difference.
say? A plan is out of date the moment it's written, and in the heat of battle, but without a plan, you're going to be all over the place. So I always look to say, well, what are the first 5 things that we need somebody to do that'll cover the first 5 hours? So just get that part down.
Yep.
And then start tabletopping it and figure out where your next 5 hours is going to look like based on the scenario. But no matter what you put into there, after you do the first 5 things, you don't know what's going to happen.
It evolves. It has a life of its own. Yeah, exactly. So you build some architectural structures around. These are the channels we're going to communicate on during the incident. Yep. We're all in every major conversation.
There's a hierarchy that we're going to follow from.
There's a leader. There's a note taker. There's a task doer, whatever the key roles are, and then it just kind of evolves. But it did put me in the mindset of look, for every kind of major system you have or potentially critical system you have, if you don't have this checklist, what I think of as a playbook, but I've seen organizations kind of get playbooks wrong. I was just get a checklist. How do you use a thing? Who needs to be involved if there's a problem? And I love the first 5 hours thing. I'm definitely going to take that forward. But yeah, it's exactly that.
So I thought you were going to go somewhere else too, which your playbook should have this. And a lot of places may not know how to do this, but it's have you practiced actually cycling your creds. And it's more than just your users changing all their passwords. It's any kind of place where there's keys, any kind of certificates, super user or service accounts. You need to recycle all of those things.
Oh yeah.
And if you don't know how to do it, and I heard the advice for this particular item is if you don't know how to do it, and we're this many days past when this thing came out, but it's so new that we just don't know, then maybe you don't do it.
I saw that. I don't know if I feel good.
I'm not sure either.
I don't know if I personally would
not do it.
Depends on the confidence level, I would
but
say.
If you are a really large company with so many, your 100,000 employee or whatever it is, organizations, and you have vast infrastructure and you just don't know, you need to really think about it if you're not already practiced at cycling those.
Well, I think for me, that's the takeaway though. If this event makes you recognize we don't know how to do this, it's an opportunity to figure out how to do it, because ideally you're not going to be impacted, but it's effectively then an IR test more or less, right? That you can learn from.
Yeah.
I don't think you would panic to do it.
No, and the other part of it was if you don't see any evidence that any accounts are being misused after this many days, monitor for that, but don't try to ruin your company by trying to by cycling all the creds, rotating all the credentials, if you're not sure how to do it.
That gets into interesting. Yeah, I agree with
So don't cause an outage yourself.
Don't make it worse.
And when I say don't panic, that's exactly what. Don't cause an outage or whatever. But it does bring up this interesting thing in terms of this conversation that we always have with executives, which is reasonable friction versus unreasonable friction, right? Because if the business we couldn't possibly change all our passwords, it's kind of okay, well, let's talk about why. Because if that is true, well, you have a limiting function that would really impact you during an actual event anyway. You probably should handle that.
Yeah. What else you got on this one? Because I thought you were going to bring up something else because we were recently riffing on, what else has happened in the news recently. Well, 23andMe.
Oh, right. Yes, of course.
is filing for bankruptcy. And, I think a couple years
ago. 23andMe? by the way?
Not me.
No.
I have.
You have?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
All right.
I haven't.
And so 23andMe's filed for bankruptcy because, a few years ago, I think they had a data breach, and
Yeah.
and then it's just not taking off like it was going to. The company value went down, and at this point, they're on major sale.
Yeah.
You know what's on major sale? Rick's
data.
DNA data, because he had his testing done. But anybody who has their stuff done. So the main reason I want to talk about this is just to make sure that if it's possible by the time this cast comes out, that you can go in to 23andMe and have your data deleted. That might put you in a better position than somebody who leaves their data in there and you don't know who's buying the company and the data. So that was the main thing I wanted to share.
Yeah, and I think it's a good idea. I have thought a couple times, tried to think through what the risk scenarios are.
Yeah.
So someone buys my DNA and then I go, now what? And it's fair to be
China uses the DNA to test a new virus out for maximum efficiency.
specifically on me?
Yes.
No, for everybody as a whole. Type of thing.
But that's a group, yes.
I like the other
Maybe.
idea.
Specifically
How
on
about
target.
they buy your DNA to then analyze where you have more likely maybe
Like where you're
risk factors,
predisposed?
higher diabetes or something like that, and then use that for targeted advertisement on Facebook.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
No, but I do think
People have gotten into trouble a little bit
Yeah.
with that, targeting. But that's an interesting line. I don't think everybody's ever used that. Like, is DNA your medical information? Maybe, I don't know.
I mean, it is more and more, right?
Right.
So I think, and again, I'm not trying to suggest whatsoever that I disagree with. Hey, think about deleting your data, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's an interesting academic risk question in terms of like, oh, well, what's the thing? But the way tech's evolving, someone muted.
Don't. Go ahead.
All right. But the way tech's evolving, it's interesting to me to think about like, well, how could people use this? And like, oh, well, is AI at some point going to be able to replicate I don't know enough about how biology truly works to know this, so I'm just riffing. But could someone like replicate my fingerprint or like my iris, eye scan thing or some biometric thing based on my DNA? Like,
Did you make another Rick
I don't know.
in a lab?
Gartner calls it a digital twin.
Yes.
But anyway, I just think it's interesting to think like what I don't know that I haven't thought of any immediate risk factors, but that doesn't mean that there aren't long-term risk factors of this data being out there.
Yeah, it is interesting. You know what? I didn't think. Well, obviously, I didn't have skin in the game. For this.
Quite literally.
Yeah, exactly.
But DNA in the game.
Yeah.
It's funny to me because this was a topic for a couple of days. It wasn't that long in the news cycle, but I thought it was interesting that essentially, if we weren't talking about DNA and any other data that we're talking about,
Breaches in general.
yeah, just like any other company that has we could talk about like hospitals all the time get bought and sold. Nobody thinks a second about all the data they
Well,
have
that's
on.
really funny because I was going to bring up something I thought you were going, but which is what should you be thinking about when you're sharing any of your personal information with a third party? But let's talk about the hospital one because I was at a conference last year, and it was a healthcare conference. Wasn't even a cybersecurity conference, and I met some folks who their entire business is to go around and buy hospitals that are going out of business or bankrupt.
Yeah.
And they buy them for the data set, and then that data is available, and then it can be resold to other hospitals and things like that. Or also it becomes, if somebody needs to get access to their medical record, it needs to be around, and they can always charge a fee for the processing of providing it. And so, these couple of gents who started a business, and what they're doing is going around and just buying up hospital data. So that's a thing.
Well, and I would also posit that in mergers and acquisitions, right, when someone has a legit offer on the table, or even like a half legit offer on the table, a lot of information gets shared. And I definitely know stories where people will go and pretend that they're interested in purchasing a bunch of different organizations and collect a ton of data on the market through that, and then be like, yeah, you know what, you're not right for us. Yeah, you know what, our funding didn't come through. Yeah, you know what, all these reasons. But you still have the data.
Right.
And are you technically supposed to destroy that? Yeah, but frankly, the pre-M&A agreement type stuff that I've seen in the past tends not to be particularly strong on the control of sensitive data. There's some of it, but I've seen ones that are pretty weak,
I mean,
actually.
at that point, like, you shouldn't be sharing. I can't think of a use case in an M&A that you would share actual sensitive data, type of thing. But there's a lot of IP.
What do you define as sensitive data?
Like a customer's, I don't know, social or something like that. Like, I can't think of, like, somebody coming in a company like, show me your database, and
Well, no, but
I need a dump of that.
But it depends. Well, that does happen though, as particularly when it's sort of a cross industry thing. So like, hey,
they'll look at cross impact on their industry.
No.
They will look at that from their customer base.
Yeah, but I'm saying like, hey, I'm spinning up the next 23andMe. I want to potentially buy your hospital or healthcare system, but to understand if it's going to be worth it for me, I need access to some of these records. I need to see some of this stuff to understand what you really have.
So here's what I end up getting.
I haven't been involved in those, type of thing.
Is probably on a weekly basis, I will get an email or a phone call that the market's hot. All the investors want to buy cybersecurity companies. Can we talk? Is yours, is CISO for sale? And I delete half of these. But once in a while, I'm like, well, what exactly do you want to talk about?
Yeah.
So I get on a call just because I want to hear what they have to say. And some of them say, oh, if you jump on a call, we'll share what the market's doing in this area. And I'm like, yeah, I want to learn.
Yeah.
But they start probing for a lot of stuff.
How do you know what the market's doing? Because you're having tons of these calls.
Yeah, they are. And they want to know, what's your revenue? Well, is it more than this? Well, if it's less than that, we're not interested. So I need to know if at least it's this. And they just go on and on. How many people do you have? How many and things they could easily find on LinkedIn and other stuff. But they're just probing for a lot of stuff even before there's any kind of NDA in place.
Right.
Yeah, but a lot of that generally is open, type of thing.
Yeah, but they're mapping the market. And now all of a sudden they have sizing,
yeah, exactly,
and a lot of things there. And then they start saying, well, tell me about your customers. What's your largest customer? What percentage of your overall revenue is that? And I'm not answering any of these questions, but they probe and they want all this stuff, and then they want to,
but all that would actually go into the evaluation.
Yeah, it would. But I'm going with how many of these calls are fake.
Right.
Yeah.
And are just people gathering data and had no intention of doing any of this, and then selling it to other places.
Right. Yeah.
Yep.
I do think it happens. So.
Yeah, I get, a ton of stuff. Obviously, you're way better than me, but I still get the emails, and I think I've responded to one, saying, now is not the right time for funding, but, most of it is just like, hey, we're interested in funding your DBA company that you registered. It's like, oh, you have no idea,
I get the weird ones too. Those easily get deleted. But it's very interesting. So, I don't know. What's your takeaways for how people should think before they put their data out there?
I think it's a lost cause.
I was going to say, I think I'm slightly embarrassed to admit that I'm becoming numb to it.
Yeah.
Which I really hate the reality of. And I guess it shouldn't be an excuse not to try and remain with some semblance of privacy. But I mean, when everything from, the parking app I use, right, to park downtown Pittsburgh, to the credit agencies that I don't get a say as to whether or not they have my data, to others, to
it's everywhere. So you don't have to answer
Yeah.
this. You haven't decided yet, but have you decided if you're going to go into 23andMe and delete your records?
Yeah, I mean, I will. Yeah,
It's easy to be proactive and just do that.
it's easy, and to me, it's primarily because I'm in this industry. You're kind of paranoid by nature, risk averse. And I go, yeah, I don't really although I don't know it's a risk today, I don't really know what the risk is for it tomorrow, and it doesn't hurt me to get rid of it now.
Right. Yeah. Good.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's an easy target for you. Like, go up to the website, delete it, type of thing. Like,
Right.
a lot of times when we're talking about like our risk acceptance on data out there, like
It's already taken.
it's like there's nothing I can do, type of thing. Like, and honestly, I'm not going to waste my time chasing down something that's not going to be a benefit. Like, and I pay for credit monitoring and the lockdowns and all that stuff, which is great. I think that's kind of a nice little low bar type of thing. Love getting alerts when somebody does like a credit check on me, and I get the alert within seconds. So, like somebody just did a credit check on you, type of thing. So I like having that control, but that's also something that could impact me more than somebody just having my data potentially.
Yeah.
Like, they have my social now. If they go to get a loan off of my social, all of a sudden that's an impact on me. That's going to affect my credit. That's going to, do other stuff, into that. That's what I want to avoid is time loss, into that.
It's risk-based monitoring, right?
Yeah.
It's like what we counsel organizations do all the time. It's like, yeah, you could, max out your log verbosity across the board and send all of it to an aggregator and, alert on it. Or like, let's think about what's important and watch that stuff.
Yeah. So I really love your takeaway. Maybe we should wrap up on that, which is you can't control what's out there. You can't control what people are going to do with it, but at least lock your on the three main credit agencies.
Yeah.
Lock your stuff. Get the app that will alert you within seconds when somebody attempts to do something, so that you can check it out.
Yeah.
Because now you can go into defense mode. You can't prevent.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's good. Well, this would make a really great talk at BSides Pittsburgh, and that's coming
We are
up.
on fire for the segues here.
So, BSides Pittsburgh, we talked about it last time. I just wanted to do a quick shout out that organizing's going well. It's Friday, July 11th at Rivers Casino.
Yeah.
And again, we're aiming to get the biggest one yet, which will be tough because last year was the biggest one yet.
Yeah.
But we still are taking talk submissions. We have 3 tracks instead of 2 from last year. I was just hanging out and talking to the people who are going to run the wireless village, and they have some really cool stuff set up. Some simulations, I think, for hacking CAN bus on cars, and stuff you can do, things you can do with like the flipper, stuff like that. So again, tickets, they're the cheapest are going to be right now until April 14th, and then they go up. And we still have.
So if you're listening to this, go out and get it.
Get them early because it'll.
Yeah, this will get released early April, so you only have like a week.
Clock is ticking.
Yep. And the whole reason we're going to raise prices this year is because we want to be able to manage making sure there's enough food, and we have to pre-order that. We want to get the T-shirts pre-ordered. Everybody who registers and goes through that process, they get a free T-shirt, and so between the T-shirts and the food alone, we're probably spending 50, 60, 70 a person easily.
Yeah.
And the ticket's $20.
Yeah.
So you're going to get at least come to the event.
Even if you don't like security.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Although, why are you listening to this? Because you like bourbon.
Yeah. And come talk to our sponsors because they
Absolutely.
really, they really find this to be one of the best events for getting a lot of people who are super interested. And I hear that the sponsors get a lot of good business out of BSides Pittsburgh. And the reason we keep it so cheap is unlike other cybersecurity cons that are going on in town and around, we're not in it for the money. We just do it because we love to do it. We love to give back to the community. So we're just putting, BSides Pittsburgh out there as, every bit of money that's left over rolls into the next year.
Yeah.
So we'll have that and some good exciting things.
Yeah. So if you haven't submitted a talk, but you have a couple ideas brewing, get that in. Submission deadline's coming. So,
And if you're talking to one of your vendors right now about renewing your contract, ask them if they're sponsoring BSides Pittsburgh and tell them you want to see them there.
Yeah, I love that. Because they'll probably have swag.
Yeah, yeah. So, yeah, that's about it on that one.
Great. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. And we didn't mention the happy hour afterwards. So.
Oh, yeah. So the BSides will have a happy hour from 5 to 7, and we made a big mistake last year. We didn't put that on the schedule, and so a lot of people were like, what, a happy hour?
Right.
Yeah, and so we'll make up for it this year. We'll come to that, and then come hang out with the rest of us, go to the happy hour after the happy hour.
Right.
And we'll go find the best cocktail bars in Pittsburgh and hang out there.
We do. Yeah.
Be smart. We're at least some of us are getting hotel rooms and everything.
Yeah.
The hotel block is up.
Or the hotel block is up.
It is up now.
I need to book that and everything. Or get an Uber home or whatever it is, you know, type of thing. Yeah, definitely.
Or walk the 1.5 miles at 1:45 in the morning
There are
from
options.
downtown.
Plus that midnight pizza. Yeah.
Oh, that's the best pizza ever.
It is good.
That is.
Tastes better at midnight.
So,
Yeah, fun times.
when speaking of having a drink after something, what are
Yeah,
we?
what
we
is
drinking
this?
here?
Segue. So I pulled this out of the cabinet here. This is Calmet. They're typically some of the more expensive bourbons that are out there, at least from a retail price perspective. I would probably rate them as kind of middle of the road. You know, they're good with this. This is their small batch Kentucky straight bourbon whiskey. It's a blend between their 15-year-old and 8-year-old one. 86 proof. We're mentioning it's a high corn mixture, about 71%.
And it's sweet.
Where it is.
I think it reads sweet. You can taste it.
You get like a grain, a good grain on the nose and everything. And then, it's it almost tastes, it's weird. It tastes a little bit hot. We all agreed, like, on your tongue for about a second or two, it tastes almost hot. But it's 86 proof, you know.
And then it goes away.
Cools
And then it goes away.
You don't
real
get
quick.
the what did I call it earlier?
Oh, the wasabi burn.
The wasabi
Yeah.
effect, where you know.
But yeah, and then it settles off into a nice, like, you know, even flavor. It is sweet, but yeah, I don't get a lot of like different notes coming out of it. It's all right, you know, type of thing. Like,
I do like the smoothness of it though, and normally I'll try my bourbon.
That's a good point.
And then I will drop a like a very small chip
cube.
of ice or just a little bit of water in it, and it opens it up. But this didn't need that. This I wouldn't add anything to it, and just straight, no rocks.
Yeah.
great.
Yeah, I like it.
Yeah.
Cheers, guys.
Cheers.
All right. I think we have, one left topic?
Yeah,
One for this and everything.
probably one good one yet.
Yeah, so I brought this up. I actually had it in a couple of different episodes that wanted to talk about, but always slipped to the end and we got too long and everything. But I wanted to talk about vulnerability management and how to do it right, you know, with this. So I've had a few customers that, particularly even recently, have been struggling with this. So they have some requirements, specifically out PCI, that, hey, you got to fix, you know, your vulnerabilities in a timely manner. You know, PCI is very specific, critical, has to be within a month. Mm-hmm. They open it up in a 4.0 to say, like, you still have to fix them, but you have flexibility, you know, to what time you do that to, you know.
Tell me about the flexibility. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, so if it's not critical, they have a set time.
Okay.
1 month, you know, type of thing. The rest of them, they say you can fix them per, like, you know, if you have some SLAs, but you have to fix them, you know, type of thing. So you can have like mids or like highs and mids, and there's been some discussions, like some QSAs think you have to fix all vulnerabilities. Like, I've actually heard that argument. I'm like, no, that's not a thing.
Yeah.
Like, so you set where your bar is on the acceptability of those SLAs, but you can also push it out to 3 months, 6 months, something like that.
Is the right way to handle that is you have your policy, and then you memorialize in your standard what you decided for your company for those ones that aren't the criticals, because that's been decided for you.
Yep.
And so is it mandatory to actually decide, and does PCI expect you to have a vulnerability management policy?
Yes.
And does it expect you to have a standard that says for lows, mediums,
Yes.
highs, this is your time frame.
Yes.
So you need to define all
Or
that.
no time frame. You could actually put it as
really?
acceptable. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
because I mean nobody's fixing all lows. There's
For lows you could say no time frame.
But I
that might be
suspect,
acceptable.
but I suspect a QS. Is there a QSA? Like if someone says no time frame for highs, is that like typically going to be like frowned upon?
So there are some guidance on to highs have to be fixed.
Okay.
And everything.
but not in the 30 days.
10
But
years.
not in the 30 days, correct. So there are, again, gray areas in PCI.
Right.
It's an annual basis. So technically, you probably have to do it. They give the example of 3 months,
Okay.
type of thing.
Yeah.
But so reasonability would likely be.
They're gonna do a
but
design
They've
review.
removed a lot of the reasonability from the QSA and put it on the merchant.
Interesting.
So they've removed kind of doing a holistic risk assessment and do targeted risk assessments now. And you're basically analyzing some of this stuff and coming up with your own terms onto this. So technically, you could come out and say, yeah, we're patching highs on an annual basis. As long as the merchant can define it, defend it in
was gonna say,
a
as
TRA
long as it's
and all
defensible.
that, they're taking it out of the QSA's hands.
Gotcha.
At
Interesting.
that point. Now, there are probably some abuses and all that stuff, but for the most part, I think it's fair for the merchant to define it themselves, into this.
Assume positive intent.
And if the PCA wanted to crack down harder and say, okay, highs, have to be 3 months as well, criticals one, I think criticals is actually too long,
when you said 30 days, I was like,
yeah,
well,
I mean, and it's been like that for a long time.
Yeah.
Critical, if you're looking at that and in the CVSS score, that's between 9 and 10, type of thing. Like, critical to me is like 0 day on the perimeter, or something along that lines, like something exposed that anybody
Remote
can exploit,
code execution,
or something like
yeah.
that. That's pretty likely, to happen. Like, that's critical. That's a drop everything you're doing, get the IT team involved, and we're either shutting it down and or patching it, whichever one's quicker, type of thing. A little wiggle room with that, but you know what I mean, into that.
But as a security leader, your intent is you're expected to make sure the company doesn't get breached. And so, of course, you would say, this is a critical, this is rating a 9 or a 10. I'm not sitting here suggesting you're going to take any longer than you need, and I would prefer that you just stop what you're doing and do it tonight, because I'm being held accountable for the breach, not for the financial loss.
But.
Well, true, but you still will be. And we can talk. That's a whole other conversation about how to push accountability to where it actually belongs, along with the responsibility and shepherding your program. But that's a different topic. In this case, if I'm responsible for making sure this happens, I'm going to be the one saying, "Yep, I don't care if we got to turn off credit card processing because I'm going to get fired." If we have a breach,
right?
So somebody else is going to lose their job if we don't make enough money. And we'll all lose our jobs if we don't make any money.
Right. Eventually.
But which is worse?
Yeah, and it all goes into likelihood, and that's a judgment call, into a lot of this stuff and everything. But it's just one of those things, and then it naturally goes into a conversation of from a company just relying on their vuln scanner, Rapid7, Nessus, whatever it may be, Qualys, from just relying on what it's telling you to what you should actually translate.
You mean when it tells you here's the criticality rating?
Here's the criticality rating. And then, my conversation always to these companies is like, okay, that fits into your time frame. Whatever your time frame says, are you willing, able, have the resources to tackle all this stuff, into that time frame there.
Right.
Is it that criticality, into that? Let's validate that first.
So let me just clarify. Rapid7 says it's a critical, but you have the opportunity to define what Rapid7 is saying into your own terms, and you can say, well, our critical is actually Rapid7 saying it's a critical plus, it's in this scope of our infrastructure. If it's over here behind 3 firewalls, and it's not PCI, then we consider that a high, maybe even a medium, because Rapid7, we're not taking its rating as gospel. We're going to tailor that through our own knowledge of our environment and decide what it is and put a couple other parameters on it before we rate it.
Because
is that what you mean?
Yeah. Any vulnerability scanner out there, they always take it in the context of this server sitting in a wide open network, or something like that.
I don't think a lot of people think about that.
Yeah. Because, and then you mentioned like 3 layers deep. Like I've had a lot of cases where it's a vulnerability, it's still remote code execution, onto the AD server or something like that. But the ports that they're talking about aren't open to the entire company. Like for you to actually even get access to that, you have to be an admin, to even get onto that network there. So now
impact doesn't change, but the probability of this thing being exploited.
Only trusted people essentially going into that network there. What are the chances? They already have credentials to access it. Why do they need a vulnerability to, access it as well? And again, as long as you're confident that that's the design and the layers of security that you have into that as well. Like utilizing zero trust, the same thing. You're providing a good dynamic segmentation scoping into that might minimize your impact to some of these vulnerabilities on the network, type of thing. But if you have a wide open network, it could change the aspect. One of the things I commonly say to customers is, if it's telling you a critical and it's an internal vulnerability, I have a hard time believing that, type of thing. Like, just for the fact that you have barriers and it's only employees, like, there could be a justification for it to be critical. But critical to me is you're dropping all your daily activities and you're getting on this now. Mm-hmm. Like, that's my definition of a critical into this case here. Like, I am pulling your time as security, pulling my, card here and saying we need to do this and do this now,
Don't show up to that audit meeting because we need to fix
now,
this
it could
thing.
still be high if you have a wide open network and, all that stuff and everything. Like, if somebody clicks on a phishing email and all of a sudden they can exploit something to the server, okay, yeah, I get that, type of thing. But that's now a chain of events, not a single event, type of thing.
Yeah.
Into that. So, so going back to designing your vulnerability management program, really where I've seen like problems, like if you have 100 assets, it should be manageable, like it's not that hard, type of thing.
Still comes down to the resources you have to manage it.
Hundreds of thousands of assets. I've seen some companies, I've done PCI stuff where we've done thousands upon thousands of assets just in PCI scope, into this. Yeah. Companies.
Are those like national chain restaurants and stuff like that?
Payment centers. Actually, a lot of the retail stuff, they try to shrink it down as much as possible. Where we've actually had the biggest scope is payment processors. Gateways and everything, where they cardholder data is just a token of currency, a unique ID for them, type of thing. And they process trillions of transactions a year, type of thing. And every system has that card data. So
that's what they do.
Yeah, segmentation is almost a moot point. And we've actually gotten a conversation with like banks and other stuff where you change the kind of strategic segmentation to not centralizing what has card data, but what doesn't. So you're actually carving off systems that has nothing to do with the banking infrastructure, might be marketing or something. So it's almost a reverse segmentation approach and everything like that. But this is getting off topic, into this. It's with the vulnerability management, when you have hundreds of thousands of assets on it, it's really hard to keep up when you're getting reports from Rapid7 and it's saying like you are now 4 months, 5 months, 6 months behind on what we say is critical and you haven't addressed those yet, type of thing. And they might be different systems out there that, it's hard to patch, you have to engage a local admin to do stuff. Yeah.
So what do you find works well with a company? So let's put it in this scenario. You're a security director, probably maybe a CISO, but I'm thinking more of the at the director level. You're responsible for to get it done, and you're also a little bit tactical. You need to work on this. What do they do when the scanner comes back? It shows them all this stuff, and now they need to they can't just send an email saying go patch all this stuff, but they need to put some process in place.
Yeah.
Like, what are you seeing works well?
I've talked a lot. Why don't one of you guys go?
Well, I mean, I think we hit on some of it before, right? You have to have a process in place to analyze if something's critical. Is it really critical? Is it typically critical, but for us on this system, it's not that important?
And who does that go to?
I think,
in my opinion.
From my perspective, it has to be a combination. Again, we're talking about like mid to large enterprise organizations here.
Yeah.
I think it has to be a combination of the team that supports the relevant infrastructure and the security team.
Okay.
Right?
Who's primary though?
I would typically, so the flow that I've seen work well in the past is a security analyst, a member of the security team, maybe not the director, but a member of the security team takes a glance at it first so that they can rapidly analyze it from the security lens and go, oh, well, this is part of a segmented network. It's internal only. Yeah, it says critical, but downgrade, right? If it goes past, I go, yeah, I have no reason to downgrade this, right? There's a conversation or a touch point or a process by which you go, hey, network team, you're responsible for this asset. Security team doesn't like really know much about it outside of its place on the inventory and so on and so forth. We're getting a note that it's a critical thing. Like, quick agree, disagree, right? Give them a chance to voice it. That comes back. If it's a disagree, okay, why? If it's an agree, route the fix.
Right. So from what I heard, and I agree with you, security owns the definition, but seeks input from other relevant teams,
absolutely.
Type of things.
Yeah, I would take a contrarian approach to that.
Oh, really?
I would look for the asset owner, the person, the group, the team that has the actual ability to make the change, and they're the ones accountable to. You usually like think of an infrastructure where you have your sysadmins that are supporting the infrastructure, but they're actually supporting pieces that support an application. And then you have an application that has an application owner. And typically those application owners are in IT from that perspective that align to a business owner for the use of that application. So now what I'm looking for is the security person to facilitate the conversation, but not to have to take the brunt of things not going well.
So you're saying the risk owner, the owner should own the risk.
The asset owner should own the risk, but not without checks and balances. But the asset owner should own the risk. And so if it's going to impact some department head outside of IT's application that delivers the service that they're responsible for selling, they should have some awareness that there's a vulnerability or 1,000 vulnerabilities that affect that.
I don't think we're disagreeing on this. What we're talking about is setting the risk, and I think that should own to security. Whether owning the risk and whether you're fixing or not, I would agree with go to the asset.
Oh, then we're talking the same thing. Okay.
Yeah,
because as advisors, right, you have to say, hey, we see no reason that this isn't as bad. We ran a scan. Scan came back, said something's really, really bad. We see no reason not to think it's really, really bad. Right? We did our, here's this thing, we think it's really, really bad. We got to do something about it.
Right.
And now if security sets a risk, they're responsible to make sure it's getting
resolved.
Right. Yeah.
Or accept, mitigate, whatever.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Honestly, at that point, the business says like, hey, it's a critical risk. And there might be some internal process like, hey, if it's critical, it needs to go up to the CIO, CTO, for approval or something like that. Like if it's a medium or high, maybe there's some flexibility on the, the IT owner, to do that. Whatever it may be, it's up to the owner at the end of the day to meet the SLAs and or follow a process to, accommodate that.
All right. Yep.
And I know you're not suggesting that the business sets the risk, but I have seen organizations that flowed in the opposite direction. And what ended up happening was the business went, yeah, I know the scanner said this is a big deal. We don't think it's a big deal. And then it stops there, and then security never becomes aware of, right, or never reviews in the right light.
I've never seen that.
Yeah, I've seen it a couple places.
Interesting.
Well,
because security usually owns the scanner infrastructure, so how would they not be aware of like some of the stuff coming back from the assets?
It comes down to like hyper lean security teams that maybe have misinterpreted the push the risk onto the business conversations
Which is
we
being
have.
the coding pipelines, or you're talking about actual like
More like
network assets?
More like infrastructure,
yeah,
right?
like Rapid7 Nessus scans coming back and everything.
Yeah, and you say, hey, first reviewer is the network team, or first reviewer is the business team, or this app team, or whatever it is.
I could totally see somebody saying, oh, yeah, that's not really affecting anything critical. And they're not qualified to make that.
Exactly.
And the security analyst enters it in as accepted.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden you have an accepted risk in your, well, it's not even a risk register at that point, but you're just your vuln list, and it's not going anywhere.
I don't want to suggest I've seen it terribly commonly, but I have seen a couple enterprise grade organizations that maybe didn't think about all the ramifications of how, in the order in which they try to, I don't want to say shift risk to the business, but make sure that the business is the decider in terms of remediation, right? Because if they cede their opinion on things, well, all of a sudden security doesn't really have a seat at the table. They don't really have an opinion, and things can get missed because, to your point, they're not the experts.
Right. Yeah, but at the end of the day, I think, you're setting what you think the risk. You're evaluating the situations, and into your case there, if somebody sets it and they don't even know what an RCE like actually stands for, type of thing, is like, all right, I don't think they have their own interest, because if they rate it as critical, they get more work, type of thing. So that's why I think the separation of duties from security, who's trying to appropriately set it, but when they set it, they're not necessarily getting more work, type of thing.
Right.
Like between high and critical or stuff, like technically you shouldn't be the one patching. Again, the separation of duties to keep that kind of pure.
I always think of it as like the prioritization filter too, right? It's useful for the security team to pass along what they think are real criticals and filter out what they don't think are real criticals to the infrastructure teams or the application teams that need to fix them, because, you only get so many shots, like call them appropriately, right?
Oh yeah. So from my experience at a large company where this was happening, we would have tons and tons of vulns come up across all these variety of different criticality level systems.
Yeah.
And we would, as we were building this process, we early on made mistakes. And the mistake was, let's just ship the list of all the stuff to the sysadmins and say, get this done.
Exactly.
It would never get done. We found it more effective to do a couple different threads. One is, these are the top 5 I need you to do this week. Gets so much more action than, here's the list, go and fix them.
Do stuff.
Yeah, because a list that was so big, nothing gets done. It gets like, I have 18,000 things to do this week, and reading 40 pages of this isn't going to make the cut.
Yeah.
I'll read the 5 things, and that's what they would do.
Yeah.
So we got much more effect that way.
And these were highly manual fixes, I would assume.
These were, you got to go patch things.
The one-off, two-off systems
change
that are out there.
Yeah.
Because you'll typically have your operational systems, so your Microsoft patches that come out.
Yeah.
They'll go through a filter, but generally they should be on a monthly patching cycle.
They'll take care of themselves. They'll catch up after a month.
Yep.
But then the other stream that we'd put in place at the same time was actually run it down, do a threat model of, wow, this is a really bad vuln. And even back then we're like, is there a known exploit? Now some of our teams have started, KEV, known exploitable vulnerability. Yeah. And so you take those kinds of things and you weigh that into the situation. So if you have those, this is a critical, and there's a known exploit out there, and let's look at what systems this applies to. Now, let's go do the thing. We're going to go talk to the person outside of IT who's responsible for the revenue stream that the service this thing runs on, is there, and have that conversation.
Yeah.
But that shouldn't be the first time you talk to that person. You probably need to talk to that person and say, at some point, I'm going to come and see you because this scenario is going to happen. And when this happens, I want to know that I don't have to spend a lot of time introducing myself.
Right.
I want to make sure you know what this is about.
Yep. Well, I thought you were going to go somewhere else too, because I think an additional thread I've seen be really useful in those scenarios is, look, there's a monthly 30-minute standing meeting, right? Because you're doing all the communication on the side, right? Like, these are the important things right now. These are the important things this week, right? And there's just a monthly standing meeting to say, hey, look, we're going to build this operational cadence to talk with the relevant infrastructure team about the stuff that's going on. And depending on the size of the infrastructure and the enterprise, it might just be, this is the standing vulnerability meeting where we talk about what progress has been made, what are the blockers, does security need to, help apply some leverage to the business to help make sure this thing gets fixed or not? Because sometimes IT gets stonewalled on trying to fix their things in different ways, or sometimes the business has a great point and they go, well, we need to apply additional information. So, or it could be a more general operational and communications cadence meeting where you go, hey, look, these are the projects we have going, what's the status? Here's the open vulnerabilities, what's the status? So depending on who you are as an organization, different things work, but I think it's typically important to maintain those lines of communications. And I love what you said, like, you shouldn't be, whoever's running down these vulnerabilities shouldn't be introducing themselves for the first time, right, during these processes. So I think
the person that needs to make the decision to get this thing going.
Yeah. And so I think from a maintaining relationships perspective, and also just from a making sure that there's a line in the sand once a month to talk about, okay, what progress has been made? Is this acceptable or not? If it's unacceptable, well, this is the point at which we escalate.
Yeah.
Right? I've seen those processes yield results even in busy months because people go, oh crap, like on the infrastructure, oh crap, well, I have the vulnerability meeting in 3 days from now. I really need to get moving on this thing, and then a couple things get resolved right before.
So we include, I have several customers where we've put this process in place, and it's really, I wouldn't say it's like changed the world for them, but it's made continuous improvement over years.
You're talking about the 5 things? Fix the 5 things?
No, it's slightly different. It's take those, it's not just that, but it's on the monthly is what reminded me. And it's the monthly risk committee meeting.
Yeah.
And it's called several different things. Everybody calls it something different.
Right.
Essentially, they're doing the same general thing. Like, you get in a room with the people who all own parts of the infrastructure, whether it's software development, owning the various customer support items. And it's very interesting from customer to customer that does this. The people in the room have this variety from somebody at the C-level, whether it be on the legal team or a CFO or somebody else, and then several IT different parts, and all the people are there, and they represent it well. And then when you start going through the vulns, and you're talking about the top vulns, it works great when everybody starts taking their own accountability. So I just watched a meeting this last week.
Nobody wants to be the worst on the list.
No, and
that's pretty powerful.
I just watched one this last week where they were going through the list of the vulns, and people were standing up saying, "Oh, that system, that needs assigned to me."
Yep.
And we just need to patch that thing, or that system was used for a test, or I think the Microsoft patches caught this because we had a gold image and it needs updated from what we were deploying.
Fantastic.
And all these people were jumping up to, like, say it's their turn to take accountability to get this stuff patched. And it was awesome.
Yeah.
And it took years to kind of get to awesome.
Yeah.
But if you're not awesome yet, start now.
Right.
I think that is one of the more like superhero moves you can do in a company. If you can get where you're presenting to multiple executives, owners of different areas, business units and everything, it's night and day how it transforms an organization.
Yeah.
Like, you go from security kind of being isolated, usually underneath IT and everything, and if you can get that kind of audience, into that, all of a sudden you get cooperation like nothing else.
I'll tell you one unique thing about at least 2 of the places I see this working well, and there's some other ones that aren't, but 2 of them are ISO 27001 certified. And so they've created a culture of continuous improvement.
Yeah.
And trying to figure out when something doesn't work right. I'm going to hand something off to you, because once you find the vuln, why?
Yeah, it was definitely a thing that when we were talking about these topics that I think that a lot of organizations they patch the vulnerability, but they don't take that next step. They don't go, well, why was this a vulnerability in the first place? Why was this infrastructure patch late to be applied?
RCA. What is RCA?
Root cause analysis. Why did this config drift from the approved standard? Why? And look, if it's a 0 day, well, the why is pretty easy. Like, nobody knew this was about to occur, and we responded in this way, and now you have a success story. Or if it didn't go fast enough, then you go, well, why didn't we fix it fast enough? But I think a lot of organizations that aren't as mature at this, they do the patch or the config change, or they fix the vuln, and they kind of stop. And it's much more powerful. You don't have to do this for every single one, but start doing it at least for a couple, at least for the big ones, at least for some crits. Because what you'll find is when you move upstream with some of that operational diligence, it actually makes your future vuln scans less, right? It has this add-on effect because you go, oh yeah, well this patch wasn't applied quickly enough because, well, we didn't have operational coverage and this person took vacation and this other person was on maternity leave or whatever. You go, oh, okay, well, how do we make sure that that doesn't happen in the future? And then it doesn't happen in the future, and then you don't have that problem recur. And as you fix those things, again, from a continuous improvement ISO perspective, your scans start to get cleaner and cleaner. But to your point, it's a process, right? So if you're not amazing at it now, start now.
Well, yeah, and to your point and everything, I mean, how often have you guys brought, like, because vulnerability management in the day-to-day is very tactical, very in the weeds, very system-oriented, IP-oriented, vulnerability-oriented. How often do you actually pull everybody out of the weeds and be like, all right, let's talk strategically?
Well, it's the lessons learned. Like we talk about lessons learned for IR all the time.
Yeah.
Well, vulnerability is kind of just like an IR that an attacker didn't take advantage of, right? Like,
do a lessons learned. About, like, hey, we like our current deployment of patches aren't working. We need more of a big fix solution, or something like that. Or we have a whole bunch of one-offs off of all of our M&A. We haven't standardized.
Yeah.
Maybe we need to just do a whole refresh and actually get on the same level.
Yeah, exactly right.
And this will bring down all of our work from vulnerability management. Like, I find a lot of times we are so busy in the weeds and doing the onesie twosie stuff that you're not thinking like long term. Maybe we need to do a whole cloud shift, type of thing, and put it into somebody else's problem. Like there's a whole bunch of conversations that, again, they're not will be done next month, but a multi-year shift would help, transition your vulnerability management into something working very well.
And I think it ties into the risk committee thing you were saying and the superhero move you were saying, which is when you can build that sort of coalition of some executives and some tactical people. What I've seen in the past on those similar meetings is you get the executives saying, well, wait a minute. Why did this thing happen in the first place, right? It's not enough. It's great to take accountability and stuff, but oftentimes it's the executives then saying, well, how did we even get here, right? And they do pull back to that level. But if you don't have those types of meetings, it's harder to get that conversation rolling.
Well, that's go ahead.
Well, I was just going to bring up, I think I brought it up before in one of our talks. It still like rings in my head when it was Equifax or Experian got hacked. With the Struts vulnerability, I remember like watching the CEO say like, it wasn't my fault, an admin didn't patch.
And they knew, and it was on their roadmap that they had this problem, and it just didn't get prioritized to get done in time before somebody took advantage of it.
Yeah, and to me, that just shows poor leadership. I mean, like, you don't blame like the admin. Like, no, sorry, we had bad processes.
But your point, but why didn't your admin patch?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, that's actually one of the reasons I love ISO 27001 is when you have a nonconformity, which is basically a breakdown in your own requirement or the requirement of the ISO standard, you do your root cause analysis, you cannot blame a person for a breakdown. It is a process failure that is got to be the root cause. Now, you can have a person
human error,
bad performance,
or negligence or whatever.
But again, there should be checks and balances through all this stuff where that stuff gets flagged, that stuff gets known.
Where was your safety net? Where was the oversight? Exactly. Who are the lines?
If that person was responsible for patching and they didn't patch in an appropriate time, they get fired and you get somebody else into there.
Yeah,
Like,
you fixed the you had somebody not following the process,
Right.
And then your breakdown was your check and balance.
What's your oversight?
Like to me, I
Yeah.
always look at the GRC team as the oversight, the 3 lines of defense model.
Yes.
They're the second line of defense, and that there should be a process for them to be checking to see if these things are happening. But you know, I have a mental model that's burned into my brain around the way to make this stuff effective. I just had this conversation today with somebody, and it's that the risk register becomes a prioritization tool of the GRC team, of the security team, in order to get things done. And when you have a properly logged risk, so let's take the whole macro thing we've been talking about. Lots of vulns in an area. Can you figure out, like, is there a common thing around all these criticals that are 6 months old? What is the thing? And something I see people get wrong all the time, they log a risk in a risk register and they make it a vuln. It's like a technical risk. That doesn't help anybody.
especially at macro level. That's not an enterprise risk.
No,
you know?
you need to be able to link that to an enterprise risk. And people will always say, well, how do I do that? Well, there's probably only a finite. There's a finite list of types of enterprise risk.
Absolutely, yes.
Is that going to create a breach? Is that going to create an outage? Is that going to create? And you come up with the things that are important to you.
And you can
and
often
you map
not
them.
even definitively even answer that. You're just saying it leads to a higher risk of us,
Sure.
like mishandling.
Yeah.
You know?
This
You can't
leads to
say
a
like
business
we didn't
risk.
patch this one thing leads to a breach. Like
I've always the way that I've always thought about this, my shorthand mentally for it is who's gonna be angry or who's gonna be fired.
Oh yeah.
And if it's a C level, that's an enterprise risk, right?
Right. I love
and if
that.
it's a
Yeah.
director,
and what are they
maybe it's-
concerned about?
Exactly that, right? So who's ultimately gonna need to know about this?
So you take your risk, you get the risk register.
Yeah.
But actually, if it was I'm confusing two different concepts that are very important to separate. It's your nonconformities versus your risks. A risk is
Right.
just a nonconformity that hasn't yet occurred.
Right.
And your nonconformity
Right.
is actually the breakdown. So when you
Right.
have a vuln on your system that's critical and you don't want it there, and you have a policy that you shouldn't have even had it in the first place,
Right.
and you RCA that, and you find out, oh, well, now we have a systemic problem because part of root cause analysis is, or corrective action is the first thing we need to do is isolate the problem and solve this one. Then we need to explore and see, do we have other ones like it? And then what's the underlying, that's where the RCA comes in. It's after you've stopped the bleeding. And then you look at that. Now you get that problem logged into a list. And the most effective organizations doing this, they track their nonconformities aren't like rated as high, medium, and low. It's either on or off. It's you either violated your own requirement or you didn't. And if you did, that's the nonconformity. Now, when you're looking at nonconformities, which nonconformities have action plans, corrective action plans that are in progress and on track? Right. Which ones don't have plans? What nonconformities have ineffective plans? Those bubble up, and in these risk meetings, we cover those first.
That's great.
And there's a couple things you can do, and you can have somebody approve an extension to the timeline.
Sure.
But how many times do you want to do that? And I just saw a chief legal counsel call that out. It's like, well, are we going to do another extension? Why are we extending this? Why can't we fix it?
Yeah, what needs solved here?
If we extend this another 2 weeks, is it actually going to get done? Because now all of a sudden, what's happening? You're creating a lot of liability for knowing about problems that you're not solving.
Arguing, kicking the can down the road.
Yeah,
It's on priority
and they don't
for
want
the
to do that.
organization. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So all this stuff comes together in the the risk management framework from NIST, the ISO process for continuous improvement. They all come together to take all this stuff and put it into something to prioritize it. So we're talking about vulnerability management. And remember when vulnerability management, what was it? Used to be called something different, like change management and patching. It used to be called patching by NIST, and then they change it to vuln
Oh,
management.
in like the framework.
Yeah, but that
Yeah.
incorporated now like configurations.
Yeah, all this stuff.
Yeah.
And so that was a great improvement. So now we're talking about all these vulnerabilities. And then where's it go to? It's like, well, we got to fix them. And when we're not, well, what's the root cause of that? And if you can apply it to getting that into your risk register and using that as a prioritization tool to say, we have a risk this thing could get exploited.
Yeah.
If it got exploited, then that's a problem. It's no longer a risk. It happened.
Right.
And then take that and move it through, get an action plan in place, and then track the plan. Don't try to track the risk as much as you're tracking the plan to fix the problem.
Yeah.
And then is that just a project that's on or off track? And get the right people involved so they can help you facilitate escalation.
But yeah, and to me, like solving the vulnerability is good. Solving the reason, the why behind the vulnerability is better.
Yeah.
Yep.
Earlier when we were like talking about this,
Yeah.
and I walked in and I heard you talking about that, I was like, oh, it's exactly something we're hitting on. We have a like a fractional GRC program that we offer our customers, and one of the things we do for that is we will also throw in like a penetration test. We'll throw in a tabletop exercise as part of VGRC.
Yeah.
Because it's it's easy for us to do when we're already in there operating this stuff. So when we do a pen test by one of the members of the team, and we now have the whole ability to take the findings from that and actually analyze it and push it right into the risk register.
Yeah, it's a validation of all that stuff. I find that, back when I was part of a company doing pen testing, it was such a powerful tool when you're doing like compliance stuff to say, how well are you really doing? Let's test it out, type of thing. They'd often find holes in patching, configuration management, credentials around, all that stuff.
Like the whole life cycle of what the security process is supposed to be doing.
Yeah, exactly.
I love it.
And once you get that ammo, then your job just becomes a lot easier. It's not a if.
Yeah, it's not go find.
It's not to say like, hey, like, is this an issue? It is an issue. Look at the report. Now let's talk about solutions, type of thing. So it just greases the conversation so much more when you do a pen test coming into that type of thing.
Yeah, so. I love that topic. It hit that core topic you want to hit all aspects of how to run a security program.
Yeah.
Oh, that was great.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's amazing. Like, I think I shared with you guys, like I'm dealing with one client, and just the fundamentalness of like getting this right. Like, if I'm a new security person, this is one of my first focuses, into this, is getting that report gleaming and everybody accountable to it and everybody understanding what their roles are in the organization, including executives, to this entire process. And hopefully going strategically into something that we can maintain and be better for the organization, ideally, at the long term.
Yeah.
And don't just focus on the vulns, focus on the root cause and the processes that you can build out.
Yeah, how can you optimize it? How can you outsource it if, like that's a potential with like cloud computing or something like that. Yeah, there's a lot of different ways you can attack it, type of thing. But for you, like, not to touch it coming in as a security practitioner, I feel like you're neglecting your job. And you're just asking.
Super foundational.
And you mentioned, like, we haven't talked about responsibilities, but you're asking to get fired. Like this is one of your primary roles, not to fix it, but to shine light and keep people accountable to it,
And I think the cool thing, too, is if you pull those levers and generate meaningful improvements in that space at the right level, right, kind of at the risk level, well, now you're engaging with different parts of the organization that are going to be equipped to help you with other domains of your job, right? If you are that C-level or the person that's ultimately responsible. If you're like a director of vulnerability management or something, okay, that's kind of your scope. But if it's more broad-based security, well, when you have an access issue, when the business isn't helping you the way that you want with your BIAs, whatever the thing is, right? You've already built the rhythms and the relationships and the habits by like fixing this thing and talking at the risk level to help streamline those other things. And frankly, those things just become part of these risk conversations.
Business terms.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's great.
So, Great, gentlemen.
Yeah.
So-
Yeah. We thought we were going to go short on
I
time.
know, right? Silly us.
Yeah.
They're fun topics.
Cheers. So thank you, everyone, for joining us. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. If you have any interesting topics you want us to dive into, please leave a suggestion on where we decide, YouTube, LinkedIn, where we decide with that, right?
That's the decision.
You guys are looking at me. Anyways, thank you, everyone, and stay tuned for episode 12, 1 year, coming up next time. Thank you all.
Thanks.